In a small Tennessee town, a mother vanishes, leaving her son and husband behind. 12 years later, she's back fighting for custody, claiming neglect. But when the courtroom doors swing open, secrets unravel. A hidden journal, a boy's choice, and a past that won't stay buried. Will love or regret win? Dive into the weight of years, a gripping tale of family, betrayal, and a verdict that leaves you questioning what's next. The first frost of October had kissed the Smoky Mountains, dusting the pines around Pine Hollow, Tennessee, with a brittle sheen. Daniel Hargrove stood on the sagging porch of his clapboard house, breath fogging in the crisp morning air, watching the mail truck rumble down the gravel road. 16 years he'd lived here, raising Ethan alone after Sarah vanished into the night with nothing but a scribbled note. "I'll be back when I can." She never was. He'd kept the house standing, peeling paint, leaky roof, and all through sheer will, working doubles at the lumber mill until his hands were rough as the oak he cut. Ethan, his boy, was 16 now, tall and lean with Daniel's hazel eyes and a quiet strength that made the years of struggle worth it. The truck paused at their rusted mailbox, and the driver, a grizzled man named Hank, waved. "Got something special today, Dan. Certified." Daniel's stomach tightened as he trudged down the steps, boots crunching frost. Certified mail meant trouble bills he couldn't pay, or worse. Hank handed over a thick envelope, return address stamped with a Knoxville law firm, Langston and Pierce. Daniel's fingers, thick and calloused, tore it open, and the words hit like a punch. Petition for custody modification. Sarah Ann Hargrove versus Daniel James Hargrove. Neglect, unfit parenting. Court date, November 10th, 3 weeks away. He stood there, wind whistling through the pines, as the world tilted. Sarah. After 12 years of silence, she was back, clawing for Ethan. The boy who'd learned to tie his shoes on Daniel's knee, who'd slept in a crib Daniel built from mill scraps, who'd grown up on peanut butter sandwiches and second-hand sneakers because she'd left them broke and broken. "Dad?" Ethan's voice snapped him back deep now, cracking less than it used to. He stood in the doorway, a comic book dangling from one hand, his dark hair tousled from sleep. "What's that?" Daniel couldn't speak. He handed over the papers, sinking onto the porch steps. Ethan skimmed them, his brow furrowing. "Mom," he said, like the word tasted foreign. She wants me." Daniel nodded, throat tight. "Guess so." Ethan's eyes darted to the charges: neglect, unfit, and back to Daniel. "This is bullshit. You've been here. She hasn't." The profanity stung, but Daniel let it slide. "Court'll sort it," he muttered, though he didn't believe it. Courts didn't know the nights he'd sat up with Ethan's fevers, the mornings he'd skipped breakfast so the boy could eat. By noon, Pine Hollow was whispering. At the mill, Old Man Pritchard clapped Daniel's shoulder. "Heard Sarah's back. Trouble follows that one," Daniel grunted, feeding logs into the saw, the scream of metal drowning his thoughts. Ethan biked to school, the papers folded in his backpack, mind racing. He barely heard Mr. Grayson drone about quadratic equations, Sarah's name looped in his head. He remembered her in flashes. A laugh like wind chimes, a hand brushing his hair, then a car peeling out of the drive. Daniel never talked about her, just said she'd gone off. Now she was real again, a threat. That evening a black sedan rolled up, tires crunching gravel. Daniel was in the kitchen, frying eggs, when the knock came, sharp, insistent. Ethan peered through the window, heart thudding. A woman stepped into the porch light, dark hair swept back. Coat too fancy for Pine Hollow. Sarah. Older. Lines etched around her eyes, but still her. Daniel opened the door, skillet still in hand. "What the hell do you want?" he growled. She didn't flinch. "Ethan, I'm here for my son." Her voice was clipped, rehearsed. "You don't get to waltz in after 12 years, he said, stepping forward. She smirked, a flicker of the old fire. "I've got rights, Dan. Court'll decide." Ethan watched from the hall, shadows stretching across the floor. She didn't look at him, just stared Daniel down. "You've had your turn," she said. "He deserves better." Daniel's knuckles whitened on the skillet. "Get out." She turned, coat swishing, and left. The sedan purred away, leaving silence thicker than the frost outside. Ethan stepped forward. "She's serious, isn't she?" Daniel nodded, setting the skillet down hard. "Yeah, she is." The next week blurred into a haze of dread. Daniel met Ms. Ellen Carter at her office downtown, a cramped room above the hardware store, smelling of mothballs and stale coffee. She was 50-ish, wiry, with a voice like gravel. "Sarah's got a Knoxville shark, Bryce Langston," she said, flipping through the petition. "Claims you neglected Ethan's school absences. That broken arm 3 years back, no regular doctor visits. She's painting you as a wreck." Daniel rubbed his jaw. "I did what I could. Mill don't pay doctor money." Carter nodded, scribbling notes. "We'll fight it. Ethan's old enough to speak, judge'll listen." At home, Ethan felt the shift Daniel's late-night pacing, the way he stared at the wall over burnt toast. The town noticed too. Delaney at the diner asked, "Your mama back for good, Ethan?" He shrugged, hating the pity in her eyes. Then, Saturday, he saw her, Sarah, at the football field, watching from the bleachers as he ran drills. She didn't wave, just sat, sunglasses hiding her gaze. Coach Miller barked him back to focus, but her presence lingered like smoke. That night, restless, Ethan climbed to the attic looking for old photos for a history project. Amid dusty boxes, he found it. A leather journal, edges worn, Sarah's slanted script inside. He sat on the creaking floorboards, reading by flashlight. October 12, 2010. Left Pine Hollow with Ray. He's my ticket out. Ethan's too young to understand. I'll come back when it's right. Pages later, the tone darkened. June 2010. Ray's gone. Left me in Charlotte with nothing. Doctor says no more kids. Miscarriage took that too. Hollow inside. Ethan's breath hitched. She'd run off with some guy, lost everything, and now wanted him because she couldn't start over. He shoved the journal under his mattress. Sleep lost to questions. Monday. Daniel drove to Knoxville, 2 hours each way, to scrape together records. Ethan's school grades, a letter from the mill proving his hours, a receipt for that cast. Ms. Carter called witnesses. Coach Miller, Mrs. Grayson from algebra. Sarah's side was busy too. Ethan overheard kids at school say she'd been asking about him, digging for dirt. Tuesday, he caught Daniel on the phone, voice low. "No, I can't pay that yet. Trial's eating everything." Money trouble, hidden until now. Ethan's chest tightened. Daniel had shielded him from worse than he'd known. By week's end, Sarah upped the ante. A process server dropped more papers. Affidavits claiming Daniel drank, missed parent-teacher nights, let Ethan run wild. Lies, mostly, but clever ones. Daniel slammed the door, muttering, "She's playing dirty." Ethan watched from the stairs, journal heavy in his mind. Should he tell Daniel? Confront her? The trial was 10 days off, and the walls were closing in. November crept closer, frost thickening on the pines. Ethan biked to school, the journal's weight a constant pull. He'd reread it, Sarah's regret, her loss, but it didn't soften him. She'd chosen Ray over them, and now, barren, she saw him as a fix. Wednesday, he skipped practice, pedaling to the Pine Hollow Motel, a faded strip of rooms, off the highway. Her sedan was parked outside room 7. He knocked, palms sweaty. She opened the door, robe loose, eyes wide. "Ethan?" "Why'd you leave?" he demanded, voice shaking. She blinked, stepping back. "I thought I'd find something better for us. Ray promised." She trailed off. "And now?" he pressed. Her gaze slid away. "I've got nothing left but you." The honesty cut, but so did the selfishness. He turned, biking home in the dark, her words a tangled pity, warring with rage. Daniel sensed the shift, Ethan quieter, distracted. "You okay?" he asked over dinner. Eggs again, the fridge near empty. Ethan nodded, lying. Thursday. Ms. Carter called. "Sarah's got a witness, some friend from Charlotte. Says she's reformed." Daniel cursed under his breath. "She's stacking the deck." That night, Ethan heard him in the garage, banging tools fixing the truck, or just venting. The trial was a week away, and Pine Hollow hummed with its bets at the diner, stares at the mill. Friday, Ethan stayed late at school, avoiding home. Walking back, he passed the motel Sarah's car gone. A hunch pulled him inside. The clerk, bored, said she'd checked out. To Knoxville? Closer to her lawyer? Suspense gnawed her next move was coming, and they were running out of time. The Pine Hollow Motel's neon sign buzzed faintly as Ethan stood in the empty parking lot, Sarah's sedan gone. The clerk's words, "Checked out this morning," echoed in his head. Had she gone to Knoxville, holing up with her fancy lawyer? Or was she circling closer, plotting something new? The November wind bit through his jacket as he biked home, tires humming on the cracked highway. The journal weighed heavy in his mind, Sarah's scrawled regrets, her hollowed-out life. He'd wanted answers, but her confession at the motel, "I've got nothing left but you," left him more tangled than before. Was she a ghost chasing a second chance? Or a predator sniffing weakness? Daniel was in the garage when Ethan rolled up, the truck's hood propped open, a wrench clanging against metal. The porch light flickered, casting jagged shadows. "Where you been?" Daniel called, not looking up. Ethan kicked the bike stand down. "School stuff." A lie, but Daniel didn't press, just nodded, oil smudged across his knuckles. The truck hadn't run right in months, and Ethan knew why. Every spare dollar went to Ms. Carter's fees now, not repairs. He lingered, watching Daniel wrestle a bolt. "She's gone from the motel," he blurted. Daniel froze, then straightened, wiping his hands on a rag. "Gone where?" Ethan shrugged. "Dunno, clerk said she left." Daniel's jaw tightened. "She's up to something, always was." Bye. He tossed the rag onto a workbench, cluttered with tools and empty coffee cans. A shrine to late nights, keeping their life afloat. Ethan hesitated, the journal burning under his mattress upstairs. Should he show it? Lay Sarah's past bare? But Daniel looked brittle tonight, eyes shadowed from sleepless hours, and Ethan swallowed the urge. "We'll be okay, right?" he asked instead. Daniel managed a thin smile. "Yeah, kid. We've made it this far." Saturday dawned raw, the sky a slab of slate over the mountains. Daniel drove the truck sputtering but alive to Ms. Carter's office. Ethan slouched in the passenger seat. The radio crackled country tunes, but neither listened. Carter was waiting, her desk buried under files, a cigarette smoldering in an ashtray despite the no-smoking sign. "Sarah's witness list came in," she said, tapping a paper. "Some gal named Cheryl Tatum claims Sarah's turned over a new leaf in Charlotte. Plus a doctor gonna say Ethan's asthma went unchecked." Daniel bristled. "He's fine, grew out of it years ago." Carter nodded. "They're stretching. We've got Coach Miller, your boss at the mill, Mrs. Grayson. Solid folks, but Langston's slick, he'll twist anything." Ethan shifted in the cracked vinyl chair, half listening. Asthma? He barely remembered the inhaler, tossed in a drawer by 5th grade. Sarah hadn't been there for the wheezing nights Daniel had, rubbing Vicks on his chest, brewing tea from dollar store bags. Carter glanced at him. "Ethan, you're the linchpin. Judge Tate'll ask who you want. What'll you say?" He met her sharp eyes. "Dad. Always." She smirked. "Good. Keep it simple up there." Daniel clapped his shoulder as they left. But his hand shook, just a tremor, quickly hidden. Sunday, Pine Hollow stirred with rumors. At church, Mrs. Delaney cornered Daniel after the service, her floral dress clashing with her gossip. "Heard Sarah's been asking about you, how you manage, if you drink." Daniel forced a smile. "Let her ask. Truth's on my side." But doubt gnawed as he drove home, Ethan silent beside him. Truth didn't always win, money did. And Sarah had it now, somehow. That afternoon, he called the mill, begging in advance. "Can't, Dan," his foreman said. "You're tapped out." He hung up, staring at the fridge eggs, a wilted carrot, half a loaf of bread. Enough for a week if they stretched it. Monday, Ethan skipped lunch, pocketing the $1 Daniel gave him. He sat under the bleachers, journal in his lap, rereading Sarah's words. Ray promised a house, a life. Took it all when he left. A photo slipped out, Sarah, younger, laughing with a man in sunglasses, Ethan a toddler on her hip. He stared at his own face, blurred by time, then tucked it back, jaw tight. She'd traded him for a dream that died. At practice, Coach Miller pulled him aside. "You okay, Hargrove? Look like you're carrying the world." Ethan shrugged. "Just tired." Miller nodded, gruff but kind. "Your dad's a good man. Don't forget it." Tuesday, the air turned colder, frost glazing the windows. Daniel woke to a note on the door, a summons for a pre-trial meeting, tomorrow in Knoxville. He cursed, the truck barely fit for the trip. Ethan found him in the kitchen, coffee cold, staring at it. "What's that?" Daniel sighed. "More lawyer games. Gotta go see Carter and Langston face to face." Ethan frowned. "She'll be there?" "Probably." Daniel rubbed his eyes. "Stay out of trouble, huh? School, home, that's it." Ethan nodded, but his mind was already spinning. Sarah, close enough to confront again. Wednesday morning, Daniel left before dawn, the truck's taillights fading into the mist. Ethan biked to school, the summons replaying in his head. Sarah in a room with Daniel, plotting or pleading. Classes dragged history, biology, a quiz he flunked from distraction. At lunch, he overheard Jenny Tate, the judge's granddaughter, whisper to a friend, "Grandpa says it's a mess kids caught between 'em." Ethan's ears burned. Caught, yeah. But he wasn't a pawn he'd choose. Daniel reached Knoxville by 9, the city's sprawl jarring after Pine Hollow's quiet. Langston, sleek in pinstripes, shook hands like a shark baring teeth. "Mr. Hargrove, let's be reasonable. Ethan needs his mother." "She stopped being that 12 years ago," Daniel said, voice low. Sarah's eyes flashed. "I made mistakes, Dan. I'm fixing them." He leaned forward. "By tearing him from me? You ran off with your boyfriend, left us with a broke-down house and a kid who cried for you." She flinched, but Langston cut in. "Past's past. She's stable now, job, apartment." "Can you say the same?" Carter bristled. "He's raised Ethan on sweat and grit. Where's her proof of neglect?" Langston slid photos across the table. Ethan's cast. A truancy slip. A shot of their peeling house. "Looks thin to me," he smirked. Daniel's fists clenched under the table. "That cast was a bike wreck. He healed fine. Truancy? I was at the mill. House ain't pretty, but it's home." Sarah stared, silent, then said, "He deserves more." Daniel met her gaze. "He's got more me." The meeting ended, no deal struck. Carter clapped his back outside. "They're fishing, we've got this." But driving home, the photos haunted him, his life, picked apart. Ethan, meanwhile, ditched last period, biking to the library. He searched online. Sarah Hargrove, Charlotte. A blurry article popped up. Local woman loses business in divorce 2020. Ray, maybe. It fit the journal. Her empire crumbled, leaving her empty. He printed it, tucking it with the photo. Evidence, if he needed it. That night, Daniel returned, truck coughing smoke. "She's desperate," he said over dinner eggs again. "Thinks money'll win." Ethan nodded, silent, the journal's weight growing. Thursday, 4 days to trial. Pine Hollow buzzed louder. At the diner, Mrs. Delaney served Daniel coffee, whispering, "Sarah's back, saw her at the gas station." He froze. "When?" "Hour ago." She was close, circling. Ethan heard it too, biking past the station, her sedan idled there. Sarah on the phone, oblivious to him. He pedaled faster, pulse racing. At home, Daniel called Carter. "She's in town." "Means she's ready," Carter said. So are we. Friday. Ethan woke to frost thick as snow, windows opaque. Daniel was up, packing files of school reports, a letter from the mill. Last push, he said, voice steady but eyes tired. Ethan grabbed the journal, slipping it into his backpack. If it came to it, he'd use it. At school, whispers followed him. Jenny Tate's mess comment had spread. Coach Miller pulled him aside again. Trials tomorrow, huh? You holding up? Ethan nodded. Gotta, Miller grunted. Your dad's the real deal. Tell him that. That night, Daniel sat Ethan down, kitchen table scarred from years. Whatever happens, you're my kid. Got it? Ethan swallowed. Yeah, you're mine too. Daniel's laugh was rough, rare. They ate in silence, the clock ticking toward dawn. Outside, the mountains loomed, dark and watchful, as Sarah's sedan rolled somewhere in the night, unseen but near. November 10th broke cold and gray over Pine Hollow, the Smoky Mountains shrouded in mist. Daniel woke before the alarm, the house silent, except for the drip of a faucet he hadn't fixed. He shaved with a shaky hand, the mirror reflecting a face carved by 16 years of grit lines deep around his hazel eyes, hair graying at the temples. The suit he'd borrowed from Pritchard at the mill hung loose, a relic of better days, but it'd do. Ethan stirred upstairs, the creak of his bed a small comfort. Daniel fried eggs, last two in the carton calling. Up, kid. Big day. His voice rasped, betraying the sleepless night. Ethan stumbled down, jeans faded. A flannel shirt untucked court didn't need fancy, he figured. The journal sat heavy in his backpack, a secret weapon he hadn't shared. He ate in silence, watching Daniel sip coffee that had gone cold. You nervous? Ethan asked. Daniel shrugged. Ain't about nerves. It's about you. Ethan nodded, the weight settling deeper. Outside, the truck coughed to life and they rolled toward the courthouse, frost crunching under tires. The Pine Hollow courthouse was a squat brick box, its steps worn by decades of boots. Inside, the lobby smelled of wax and old wood. Voices buzzing as townsfolk filed in, mill workers in flannel, farmers in stiff collars, Mrs. Delaney clutching a thermos. The gallery was packed, a sea of familiar faces turned jurors by gossip. Daniel and Ethan pushed through, finding Ms. Carter at the defendant's table, her suit pressed but shoes scuffed. Ready? She asked, voice low. Daniel nodded, jaw tight. Ethan sat behind them, backpack at his feet, scanning for Sarah. She swept in at 8:55, Bryce Langston at her side, both in crisp city clothes that screamed Knoxville money. Sarah's dark hair was pinned up, her coat swapped for a tailored blazer, but her eyes were hard, unreadable. She didn't look at Ethan, just took her seat across the aisle, whispering to Langston. The bailiff called, All rise, and Judge Harlan Tate strode in, gray beard trimmed, robes crisp, a man who'd seen every story Pine Hollow could tell. Be seated, he said, voice gravelly. Hargrove versus Hargrove. Let's get to it. Langston opened, standing with a predator's ease. Your Honor, Sarah Hargrove seeks custody of her son, Ethan, wrongly kept from her by a father who's failed him. Daniel Hargrove's a mill hand, barely scraping by neglects in the record. Untreated asthma, a broken arm, school absences. Sarah's rebuilt her life stable, capable. She's his mother, denied her rights too long. His words slithered, smooth and sharp, and the gallery murmured. Ethan's fists clenched lies, twisted tight. Carter rose, wiry frame taut. Neglect? Daniel Hargrove's raised Ethan alone since he was 4, when Sarah ran off with her boyfriend. No support, no visits, nothing for 12 years. He's worked doubles, patched clothes, kept Ethan in school. She's got no claim but regret. Ethan's 16, old enough to choose, and he's chosen his dad. Her voice cut through, firm but frayed at the edges. Tate's eyes narrowed, pen tapping his desk. Evidence then. Plaintiff first. Langston called Sarah, who took the stand with practiced poise. I left Pine Hollow in 2013, she said, voice soft but steady. I was young, Lost thought I'd find a better life for us. I was wrong. I've spent years rebuilding, worked retail in Charlotte, saved for an apartment. I'm here to give Ethan what I couldn't then. Langston handed her photos, a tidy one-bedroom, a pay stub. And Daniel? He prompted. She hesitated. He's struggling. Ethan's arm broke, and I hear he missed doctor visits. I can do better. Carter pounced on Cross. 12 years, no contact. Not a call, not a dime. Why now? Sarah's gaze flickered. I missed him. Realized what I'd lost. Lost, Carter pressed, or ran out of options. Sarah stiffened. I'm his mother. Not since 2013, Carter shot back. Tate waved her off, but the room felt it, Sarah's polish cracking. Day one stretched. Langston called Dr. Ellis, a Knoxville pediatrician with a clipped accent. Records show Ethan's asthma went unchecked. No follow-ups after age 8. Carter countered with a nurse from the clinic. He outgrew it. Daniel brought him when he could. Back and forth. Hours bled into dusk. Tate adjourned at 5, gavel sharp. Tomorrow, 9 a.m. Daniel exhaled, Ethan beside him, the journal untouched, but pulsing. Friday dawned colder. Wind rattling the courthouse windows. Daniel barely slept. The truck's cough waking him early. Ethan dreamed of Sarah's photo, her laugh, his tiny hand in hers, jerking awake to reality. They ate stale bread, silent, and returned to court. The gallery, swelled word had spread. Jenny Tate whispering to friends in the back. Tate banged the gavel, eyes weary. Defendant's turn. Carter called Coach Miller, a bear of a man in a faded jacket. Dan drove Ethan to every practice truck half dead, but he was there. Kid's tough 'cause of him. Langston smirked on Cross. Ever see Daniel drink? Miller scowled. A beer after a game, maybe. Never sloppy. Next, Mrs. Grayson, algebra teacher, shuffled up. Ethan's bright missed some days, but Daniel always called. Mill hours, you know. Langston flashed a truancy slip. 10 absences 2022. That's care? She faltered. He caught up. Daniel took the stand. Suit wrinkled now, voice steady but raw. She left us with nothing, house half paid, me broke. I worked doubles, fixed what broke, kept Ethan fed. Ain't perfect, but he's mine. The gallery hushed, feeling the years in his words. Langston circled. Broken arm, no specialist afford that on mill pay? Daniel's jaw ticked. He healed, didn't need fancy. And this? Langston held up a photo. The house, paint peeling, porch sagging. Home? Damn right, Daniel said fierce. Ethan's chest swelled, pride, sharp and sudden. Sarah's side countered, Cheryl Tatum, a Charlotte friend with dyed blonde hair. Sarah's changed works hard, stable. Wants Ethan back. Carter tore in. Paid to say that? Cheryl flushed. No, she's my friend. Convenient, Carter muttered. Tate frowned, scribbling notes. The day dragged more photos, more jabs. Ethan sat rigid, journal heavy, waiting. At recess, he saw Sarah in the hall, eyes red. She caught his stare, mouthed, I'm sorry, then turned away. He gripped the bench, sorry didn't fix 12 years. Day 2 ended. Tate's voice clipped. Monday, final arguments. Ethan speaks then. The crowd spilled out, buzzing, Daniel's grit versus Sarah's polish, a town divided. Ethan biked home alone, wind biting, Sarah's apology echoing. Daniel stayed back, talking strategy with Carter. She's slipping, she said. Ethan's our ace. He nodded, but fear lingered. Courts weren't fair. Not always. The weekend crawled. Saturday, Daniel fixed the truck busywork to keep sane. Ethan reread the journal, Ray's name a ghost between lines. Sunday, he walked the woods behind the house, frost crunching, thinking of Sarah's sorry. Was it real? Did it matter? Monday loomed, the final reckoning. November 13th, the courthouse hummed standing room only. Tate took the bench, face stern. "Ethan Hargrove, your turn." Ethan stood, backpack slung over one shoulder, heart hammering. The room stilled as he walked to the stand, journal in hand. "Who do you choose, son?" Tate asked, voice softer now. Ethan glanced at Daniel worn hands clasped, eyes locked on him, then Sarah, rigid, pleading silently. "My dad's been there every day," he said, voice clear, cutting the silence. "Fixed my bike in the rain, worked till he dropped. She left when I was 4, ran off with some guy, Ray." He held up the journal. "It's here. She wanted out. Came back 'cause she can't have more kids, not 'cause she loves me." Gasps rippled. Sarah flinched, whispering, "No." Langston objected, "Irrelevant." But Tate waved it off. "Read it," he said. Ethan opened the page, voice steady. "Ray's gone. Doctor says no more kids. Hollow inside, that's why she's here." The room erupted murmurs, a sob from Sarah. Carter seized it. "Your Honor, she abandoned him, now wants a replacement. Daniel's his father, always has been." Langston floundered. "She's reformed." But it rang hollow. Tate leaned forward. "Ms. Hargrove, why now?" Sarah stammered. I missed him." Tears streaking. Ethan stared. Pity flickered, then faded. The Pine Hollow courthouse trembled with the aftershock of Ethan's words. "She came back 'cause she can't have more kids. Not 'cause she loves me." The gallery buzzed, a hive of whispers and sharp intakes of breath. Sarah's sob cut through, raw and jagged, as she slumped forward on the plaintiff's table, hands clawing at her face. Bryce Langston shot to his feet, tie askew, barking, "Objection, Your Honor. Speculation unsubstantiated." But Judge Harlan Tate's gray eyes flicked to the journal in Ethan's hand, then to Sarah's unraveling form. "Overruled," he said, voice like stone. "The boy's entitled to his say. Sit down, Mr. Langston." Ethan stood firm on the witness stand, the worn leather journal trembling slightly in his grip. His flannel shirt hung loose, but his gaze was steady locked on Tate, avoiding Sarah's crumpled figure and Daniel's taut silence behind him. "It's all in here," he said, flipping to a marked page, voice rising over the murmurs. June 2018. Ray's gone. Doctor says no more kids. Hollow inside. She wrote that years after she left us. Then, nothing till now. Dad's the one who stayed. He snapped the journal shut, the sound a gunshot in the tense air. The gallery leaned forward, Mrs. Delaney clutching her thermos, Coach Miller nodding grimly, Jenny Tate scribbling in a notebook. Tate leaned back, pen tapping his desk, a slow rhythm that stretched the silence taut. "Ms. Hargrove," he said finally, turning to Sarah, "you've heard your son. Why now, after 12 years, do you claim him?" Sarah lifted her head, mascara streaking her cheeks, hands trembling as she gripped the table's edge. I missed him," she stammered, voice cracking. "I made mistakes, yes, with Ray. But I've changed, got a job, a home. I want to be his mother again." Her eyes darted to Ethan, pleading, but he looked away, jaw tight. Ms. Carter rose, wiry frame coiled like a spring. "Your Honor, let's call it what it is. She abandoned Ethan, left him and Daniel with nothing but a note and a broke-down house. 12 years, no contact, no support. Now, barren and alone. She sees him as a fix for her regrets, not a son to love. Daniel's been father and mother both. Worked doubles, patched clothes, kept him in school. Ethan's choice is clear." Her voice rang, sharp and unyielding, and the gallery murmured agreement, Pine Hollow siding with its own. Langston scrambled, smoothing his tie. "Your Honor, Sarah's rebuilt her life stable, capable. Daniel's barely scraping by, look at the evidence. Broken arm, no specialist. Truancy slips. A house falling apart. Ethan deserves more than a mill-hand struggle." He waved the photos like a flag, but the room felt the shift, his polish fading against Ethan's raw truth. Tate's pen stopped tapping. "I've seen the pictures, counsel. I've heard the boy. Final statements make 'em quick. Carter went first, standing close to Daniel, who sat rigid, hands clasped. This ain't about money or perfect houses. It's about who showed up every day, every year. Daniel Hargrove did. Sarah didn't. Ethan's 16 law gives him a voice, and he's spoken. That's all you need. She sat, a curt nod to Ethan, who met her eyes with a flicker of gratitude. Langston stood, voice smoother now, desperate to regain ground. Sarah's not perfect, but she's here, offering Ethan a future, not just a past. Daniel's love doesn't change the neglect, missed doctor visits, school days lost. She's his mother, reformed and ready. Give her the chance. He sat, glancing at Sarah, who stared at the floor, hands twisting a tissue. Tate surveyed the room, Ethan on the stand, journal in hand. Daniel, worn suit and steady gaze. Sarah, a portrait of shattered poise. Recess, he said, gavel sharp. 30 minutes. Verdict after. The bailiff called, "All rise," and the gallery erupted, folks spilling into the hall, voices clashing. Daniel turned to Ethan, stepping down from the stand. "You okay, kid?" Ethan nodded, clutching the journal. "Yeah. You?" Daniel's mouth twitched a half-smile, strained. "Proud of you." Outside, Ethan leaned against the courthouse wall, frost biting his knuckles. Sarah emerged, coat draped over her arm, Langston trailing. She paused, catching Ethan's eye. "I didn't mean it like that," she said, voice low, broken. "I do love you." He stared, the journal a shield between them. "You left." He didn't. She flinched, then walked away, heels clicking on the steps, leaving a crumpled note on the bench beside him. He didn't touch it, not yet. The courtroom reconvened at 11:45, air thick with sweat and anticipation. Tate took the bench, robes rustling, face unreadable. The gallery hushed misses. Grayson clutching her purse. Pritchard from the mill wiping his brow. "I've heard the evidence," Tate began, voice deliberate. "Custody's no small thing, especially with a boy old enough to know his mind. Ethan Hargrove's 16 law says his choice weighs heavy, and he's picked his father." Sarah's head snapped up, a choked sound escaping. Langston gripped her arm, whispering fiercely. Daniel's shoulders eased, just a fraction, breath-catching. Tate continued. "Daniel Hargrove's record ain't spotless, money's tight. House needs work, but he's been there, day in, day out. Raised Ethan alone since 2013 when Sarah left. No support, no visits, nothing till now. Her reasons, regret, loss, don't erase that gap. Stability's more than a paycheck. It's showing up." He turned to Sarah, eyes piercing. "Ms. Hargrove, you've built something in Charlotte commendable. But 12 years is a canyon. And this journal," he nodded at Ethan, "suggests motives beyond love. I don't judge your heart, but I judge your actions. Ethan's thrived with his father, not perfect, but real." Langston shifted, poised to argue, but Tate raised a hand. "Custody remains with Daniel Hargrove. Case closed." The gavel fell, a crack that split the room. Ethan exhaled, a shudder running through him, and turned to Daniel. His dad's eyes glistened, tears held back, but their hands reaching to grip Ethan's shoulders. "We're good, kid," he rasped, voice thick. Ethan hugged him, brief but fierce. The journal pressed between them. The gallery erupted cheers from Pritchard, a sob from Mrs. Delaney, murmurs of "right call." Sarah stood, trembling, then stormed out, Langston trailing, briefcase slamming shut. The note stayed on the bench untouched. Dusk painted the mountains gold as Daniel and Ethan left the courthouse, the crowd thinning. The truck rattled to life, heater sputtering, and they drove home in silence, relief too big for words. At the house, Daniel tossed his tie on the table, cracking a rare grin. "Eggs?" Ethan laughed, a sound that loosened the knot in his chest. "Yeah, eggs." Later, Ethan stepped onto the porch, frost glittering under the stars. The note from Sarah sat in his pocket. He'd grabbed it after all, curiosity winning. He unfolded it, handwriting shaky. "Ethan, I'm sorry. I wanted to fix it. Maybe one day you'll see. No signature. Just a smudge where ink had bled. He stared at it, then folded it back, not ready to feel anything. Anger, pity, or the faint tug of what might have been. The woods whispered beyond the house, dark and endless. Daniel joined him, beer in hand, first in months. "You kept that?" he asked, nodding at the pocket. Ethan shrugged. "Dunno why." Daniel took a sip, gazing at the mountains. "She's gone again, I reckon." "Back to Charlotte." Ethan nodded, unsure if he cared. "Home?" Daniel asked, voice soft. "Yeah," Ethan said, stepping inside, but his eyes lingered on the road Sarah had taken, a shadow fading into dusk. The note stayed in his pocket, a question unanswered. Maybe he'd read it again someday, or burn it. For now, the house creaked around them, warm and worn, a life they'd fought for. The mountains watched, silent, as father and son moved forward together, but changed, the future an open path winding out of sight. Thank you all for watching this video. Please comment, and let me know what you think about this story. Please like and subscribe to watch more great content on my channel.